All right. Hey, welcome everybody. For a second there, I was thinking about starting by singing a Christmas song, but then I couldn't think of one, so I just didn't do it. Instead, I just did the regular old opening of me laughing in the middle of a joke that I didn't even hear, so that I had some kind of noise as the camera started up. Welcome everybody. It is Wednesday. It is 4 p.m. Pacific. It's time for Starfinder Wednesday. I'm trying. Look at me, folks. I'm trying. So today, last week, we started the previews, the shows of the previews for the new classes for the Character Operations Manual for Starfinder. That was the biohacker. He was like this helpful assassin from across the way that could heal you with his gun. And I thought that was kind of fun. But we're not done yet, folks. We still have 2 more to do. Today, we're doing the Witchwarper. And to do that, we've got... Amanda and Owen are in the house. Yay!
Hey, folks.
Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for being here. So really quick, I don't know if you saw the news. This is really exciting.
Yep.
Just today, the Starfinder Beginner Box went up for pre-sale. It's on our website.
Finally.
And it is pretty awesome. So what I did was, let's see if this works. Boom. In the link right now, or in the chat right now, there's a link that you can click to go to the product page on Paizo.com and pre-order if you want. It should be coming out in April?
April, yes. It's an April product.
So that it should be coming out in April. I think they're saying it's planned for April or whatever the wording is, because there's so many moving parts in this thing. Like there's pieces and pawns and...
Yeah, this is more complicated than a typical product. So this is a box set. So there's a lot going into it. It has to have dice and a map and things that are coming from different places all put together and then shrink wrap together. So yeah, it's a much more complicated process to put together and to make available for you.
Yeah.
And you know, the factory Yosoki tend to get in there and take little pieces out here and there a little bit. So we have to make sure that they're in line before that we can sell these things to you folks to make sure you get everything that you pay for your Starfinder experience.
I'm hopeful that it gets out right in April because leading into what's next on the agenda is PaizoCon. Yeah. Like if we can get this thing out in April, right? Then that means that you could, I think, don't we usually do pickup? Do we do order pickup or anything like that at
Subscription pickups, yes.
But this isn't a part of a subscription. No. Never mind. Customer service is going to bust in here and slap me around if I keep saying the things I'm saying. So I'm not saying that. But, it would be great because then everybody could have their box, their beginner box. They could go into the ballroom, which is organized play generally, and have fun teaching folks the science fantasy, award-winning science fantasy epic Starfinder, which, that's what we're here to talk about today.
And last year at PaizoCon we had a lot of open gaming, so I'm really hopeful that there will be people bringing their beginner boxes and breaking them open and teaching people how to play, because the more people you teach how to play, the more stuff we'll put out for you. That's my promise.
And I have a strong feeling we'll be running some beginner box games events and things. I mean, I just have a feeling. Yeah.
I think that there's a good chance that there's going to be a lot of beginner box battles going on and all of that sort of thing. Mostly, and this is what I'm most excited about with the beginner box. Just like with the Pathfinder beginner box, what was the most helpful were the people not that needed to learn how to play, but for the folks that wanted to teach their friends how to play. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I will GM, I will help you create your characters. This little thing that will run through, this adventure that's included in here, which is its own thing. It was made specifically for the beginner box.
Yeah.
And so, you can have a chance to play this crazy RPG that I've been trying to tell you about for over a year, because you started talking about it the second it came out at Gen Con, I'm sure. And then now you can bring new folks into the fold, and then you've got a better ship at the end of the day. So it's important. I think that it's a really, really cool thing to have. So there's a link in the link in the chat. So feel free to hit that. Yeah, I'm really excited about it too. It looks really cool. Okay, that catches us up there. Last week we talked about the biohacker.
Yes, we did.
Right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, you were on the show to talk about the bio. This is going to be like the Owen show.
I'm going to be here for a bit, folks.
It's Starfinder Owen. And
Owen Wednesdays.
And then next time the chair will be a little bit closer to the table, and then a little bit closer to the table, and then it's just going to be me leaning in, being like, "Hey, everybody, welcome," and it's just going to be you, and you'll have your own camera and. I can't wait.
I can do that, I promise.
I think you could. I have no doubt.
He can. I've seen him do it. I'll say I was there, but in an alternate reality.
Oh, nice segue.
There you go. Speaking of alternate reality, Amanda,
Yes.
we are here to talk about the Witchwarper.
Indeed.
Can you give us a good overview of the Witchwarper, please?
Sure. So the Witchwarper is a full casting class for Starfinder. It's charisma-based. The concept of the Witchwarper is that it is a caster that draws its power from understanding and force of personality for pulling in alternate realities into the current reality. It's based on the theory of infinite worlds, which is a real scientific theory, in that there are infinite realities in which any number of things might be true, that the same people in the same situations exist, but in slightly different iterations. And so the Witchwarper uses magic to pull from all of these different realities and to change the world around them in sometimes subtle ways and in sometimes dramatic ways, affecting terrain and enemies and their allies and themselves in ways that are unique to this kind of witchy type of confusing occult type class.
Okay. So that, I mean, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is like Doctor Strange or something
A little
like
bit,
that,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
which is just seeing all of these things and going to the right one, and which sounds amazing. Because I always play a rogue, Team Rogue, forever. It sounds kind of complicated. It sounds, to me, it's one of those ones that's like, I got to keep track of a ton of stuff while I'm doing this thing. Is that fair, not fair? Am I being harsh?
So it's certainly not the simplest class, but no spellcaster qualifies as the simplest class, right? And one of the reasons why, for example, we don't have 2 or 3 or 4 different kinds of spellcasting and different power sources, etc., like Pathfinder does, is to try and keep things pretty straightforward. So if you have played a Mystic or you've played a Technomancer, a lot of what you need to do with a Witchwarper is already going to be familiar with you. Okay. You're going to have spells known, spells per day, you'll have a unique spell list, etc. But it does have class features that are, I don't know if they're actually more complicated, but they certainly take up some more space on the page to explain all the things you can do with them. Because we want to give you a wide range of options where if you say, I really wish that this area was full of floating rocks so that even people flying through the air have trouble moving quickly, so it's difficult terrain, right? That takes some space to explain, but it's ultimately a pretty simple concept. It's just that you've got a lot of these simple concepts linked together and one power that lets you access all of them.
Okay, so again, this is a spellcaster class. This is a spellcaster.
Yeah.
What are we thinking about doing as far as spell lists and all of that sort of thing? How does that work for this character right now, because it's still playtest?
Yes.
So how does that work for the character right now?
So the current spell list for the Witchwarper pulls from Technomancer and Mystic spells because that's all that we have currently. And the playtest document has 4 or 5 new Witchwarper only spells that are thematic to the role that we want the Witchwarper to play from a narrative perspective in the game. And that is certainly not going to be the final spell list.
No.
We actually have thousands of words of new spells coming in the Character Operations Manual that will be Witchwarper spells. So it will feel very much more niche in the final version, but right now it's sort of this cobbled together version of spells that exist in the game now, plus a handful of new things to give you a taste of what will come at the end.
It was very important to us that we get these playtest classes out as early in the process as we could. Yeah. So you kind of can't figure out all the spells a class has until you have figured out what the class does. But since you will have the same number of spells known and spells per day as Mystics and Technomancers, it is obvious that those spells should be the same total utility, right? A first level Witchwarper spell should be about as useful as a first level Mystic spell, should be about as useful as a first level Technomancer spell. Like Mystics and Technomancers, we're going to have some spells that all 3 classes can access. We will have some spells that only 2 classes can access, but we are also going to have a fair number of unique Witchwarper spells. We just cannot get all of those done without delaying the playtest so long that we would then not be able to take the feedback we're getting and implement it in a good way. So since the spells are a thing that we've already got a pretty good grasp on, and a new class with a new mechanic is much more likely to have balance issues or to not be fun, or to have things where people say this would be a lot more interesting if it did this other thing.
Right.
Those are the places where we really wanted that experience to be play tested. Because any one spell we put in the game, some Witchwarper character will take. But the Witchwarper class itself will be obviously used by everyone playing a Witchwarper, so it has a much higher impact on the total play space.
Okay. So then, when you play this character, the Witchwarper, What is the standard tactics that you would want to try to do to utilize to the fullest potential the skill set that the class has?
To me, the Witchwarper is very much about changing situations to your benefit. So we talked a little bit about being able to create difficult terrain, right? So difficult terrain is not always going to be useful in all circumstances, but that's just one thing that class feature does. So if, for example, you are attacked by a series of Elikoth who are trying to march up on you and eat you, and you need to buy time, creating a field of difficult terrain can slow them down so that you and your people have more time to make ranged attacks. If you are dealing with flying creatures that don't have ranged attacks, being able to create difficult terrain in the air, most difficult terrain doesn't affect the space around you. It doesn't create a vacuum. It doesn't affect an airborne area. So being able to do that gives you tactical options. But we also have things like if there's a hazard of some kind, if there's a pool of acid or something like that, you can turn that into a different kind of hazard. And the big advantage about that is, for example, if you're running into a pool of acid, that pool of acid may well have acid monsters in it. That's pretty standard in our kinds of adventures.
Right.
And being able to say, yeah, but that's not a pool of acid anymore. Now that's a pool of lava. Oh, and all those things that are immune to acid, they're not immune to lava. So that kind of altering the conditions of the battlefield are an important part of how a Witchwarper is going to work.
Okay. So essentially they are the one, like when you were a kid, they'd be like, the floor's lava, and
yes,
you really actually are seeing lava.
Well, now the floor's lightning.
And now the floor's lightning.
Because it is in this other reality that I say is now part of this existence.
And now it exists. I love that. That is really, really cool. I think that it's one of those things where I feel like I would outthink myself. You know what I mean? Because you look at it and you're like, I could do anything. This is amazing. And then I would just think myself into stillness.
Yeah. Oh, no. Analysis
you know
paralysis.
I mean? Oh, exactly. But it's just because the potential is there. There's potential for so much.
And this was interesting. I mean, Amanda did the first draft of the class. She did the core design of the class after the whole team had gotten together and decided what we wanted was this charisma-based spellcaster that was pulling from alternate realities as our core concept.
Okay.
And it was really interesting to see her tackle that exact issue in the design of, okay, alternate realities could mean anything, but we've got to have rules that define what that anything is. And so I think Amanda did a great job of coming up with not just the Infinite Worlds class ability, but also their special abilities that they can pick as they go that say, oh, you can change things in this way. Oh, you can create an effect like a grenade, or you can alter the kind of damage your allies are doing, that kind of thing. Hopefully will lead to a point where players will be able to say, all right, I've seen this situation come up a lot. This class feature I can choose seems like it would help with that. Like, if I've got a friend that throws grenades but they're not super accurate, okay, well, this ability lets me move where a grenade lands. That's come up a couple of times.
Shifting grenade, in fact,
right, exactly.
has been popular. Yeah.
So once you have those, hopefully, since you're picking them as they come up, they will match your play style, and you'll be able to say, well, this is useful with my group, with the way we play, with the way my GM sets things up. A lot of these things are very situational. But hopefully being able to set things up so that you make specific choices that then have triggers that you see in the playing field.
Right. So then let's get into this a little bit. So Amanda, when you were putting the class together, what were some of the inspirations and what did you pull from to kind of round out this class, as it were?
Yeah, certainly. So when we were very early on putting together the core concepts of what these classes were going to be, I was basically pitching this class to not only the Starfinder design folks on our team, but also to Eric Mona, our publisher, who was somebody who was like, tell me what this class is, what niches this class fills, what characters can I play with this class that I couldn't play with the other character concepts in the game. And so I came up with, for example, Scarlet Witch was one that I felt like was a very thematic sort of on theme or on point type of character that this class would allow you to play. Doctor Strange is one that you had mentioned as well. There, like Jean Grey, for example, was one
nice.
With a little bit with some of the terrain warping and things like that.
Yeah.
So any kind of sort of mystical type of character who has powers that are not explained, that are able to change the world around them in ways that are beneficial or ways that allow them to sort of use their their force personality, their mental capacity to make things more advantageous was the type of character that I really wanted to be able to play. And in many ways, I created a spellcaster that I wanted. Like, I made my own spellcaster class out of something that I thought was cool. And, certainly that was very early on, right? We went through a lot of iterations and things for the rules, but it was an opportunity for me to do something that I was excited about, that I would like to play, and, that made me feel like it was a cool thing to add to the game.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have the means to just create your own class, why wouldn't you? You know?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, I'm gonna be the best at this because this is exactly what I would want to play.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully everything we add is something that at least there's a group of people saying, oh yeah, I'm really excited about that, right? Because we play Starfinder, we listen to what people like in Starfinder. We are trying to create the game that a lot of people want to play. And so there's a multi-stage process, right? Very early on, I was like, okay, as looking at the design space, we have an intelligence-based spellcaster, we have a wisdom-based spellcaster. Classically in D20 Engine games, the 3 spellcasting ability scores are intelligence and wisdom and charisma. If we're going to add new classes, a charisma-based spellcaster makes sense. But that's a mechanical concern. Then you have to have the narrative question. So long before we had decided on the Witchwarper, we were saying, well, is there something where it makes sense that force of personality and sort of this innate, not necessarily learned power that speaks to being able to convince things of things, where that makes sense for a science fantasy power set? And I kind of like the idea, right, that my force of personality is in part driven by I am connected to different versions of me in a whole bunch of different realities, and I can literally use that mystic connection to convince this reality to temporarily be that reality, right? That is, for me, a neat concept. And this is very much Amanda's narrative child, and this is not a class I would have thought of. And that's one of the great things about working with the teams, that I can say, hey, I see a game mechanical niche, I think we should fill this, and here's my idea. And someone can go, yeah, we could do that idea, but here's a much cooler idea. Oh no, that is much cooler. That's one of the things I love about sort of this
right.
group with the Starfinder teams, that everyone brings their own point of view and their own experiences, and I think that helps us have a more accessible and more varied game.
Yeah, I think it's also a really good opportunity to bring sort of those brain children out there and sort of have this feeling of like, well, I think this is cool, but I'm probably the only one. And then to get reactions of people saying, no, actually, I like that idea. Continue to iterate on that. And, to get the feedback from Eric and from Owen of like, you should go with this idea. That's a very rewarding aspect of working with the team as well. So it's just a really fun aspect of class design.
But another reason we wanted to do the playtest is just because all of us think something's cool. We're still a relatively small group, right?
Yeah,
so we want to put that out there and say, hey, do these things... And even ignoring game balance questions, because we can work on game balance, and that's important, and we're looking at that. But above all that, does this look fun to you? Because we could have a perfectly balanced character class that no one wanted to play, and there's no point in doing that.
It doesn't matter at that point.
It doesn't matter at that point. And the Witchwarper is very much one of the classes that a lot of people have said, oh, just hearing about it, I'm so excited to try and play that. So I'm really very relieved by the feedback we're getting, because if it had been terrible, right, we could have scrapped it and done a whole new class. It's going to be much easier to say, okay, you like it, but there are changes you'd like to see. Well, let's talk about those. Let's gather that information. That's going to be a much easier process. And it's gratifying to see that the thing we all thought was cool, the fans all seem to think are cool.
Yeah, and now we're absolutely in the stage of tell us what you think works and doesn't work with this class, so that we can create something that is as appealing to as many people as possible. It is now out of the stage of just, I think this is cool, Owen thinks this is cool, and on down the line.
Amanda, if we were going to get that feedback from people for these characters, these classes that we're playtesting, where would they go for that?
Funny that you should ask that, Dan. We have several vectors in which people can submit feedback to us. We, of course, have the forums. You can find them at starfinderplaytest.com or just through the normal forum areas.
It's in the chat now. Look at that. I did that from my desk.
Oh, awesome. We also have surveys, which is a fairly new thing for the company to get feedback. So
very important.
Yeah. And so the links to all those surveys are also on starfinderplaytest.com, I believe. Yes. Yeah, and so each survey is, 30-ish questions or something
about
like that.
Yeah,
with some general questions about, how you use the class in play and what your experience was like, and then some very specific mechanical questions with an open-ended field at the end to, give us your feedback that you haven't already
Did you
covered.
run out of uses of infinite worlds before the end of the last fight of the day? If 99% of people say yes, maybe we need to give you more uses of that.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, the question is how satisfied were you with how this impacted play, and everyone that ran out says, oh, I'm totally satisfied, well, maybe we gave you the right amount. But getting that kind of information will let us to actually look at a statistical set of numbers. That's not the only feedback we're taking, right? The forums, there are a lot of lively discussions, people talking about their experiences, what they'd like to see, what they think works, what doesn't. We're doing our very best to pay attention to all of that. And I have a document that's already full of notes of things like, oh, that's a good point. We should discuss that. We should change that. We should work on that.
Yeah, and we're also paying attention to the organized play aspect of it as
totally.
well, which is the whole reason that we wanted to make sure organized play was a factor in the playtest. You can create a Witchwarper or a biohack or a Vanguard for that matter in Starfinder Society throughout this playtest period. You can submit your feedback through the survey. We're talking to our folks on the ground about what they're seeing, asking our employees who are working on SFS, like Thurston Hamon, what he's seeing, what people are reporting to him. And so there are various ways that you can get us this information. But the survey, I would say surveys and forums are probably the best way.
Surveys and forums are the top two, right? I mean, I'm trying to keep, there are people who will send me messages on Facebook, which I don't do that for most professionals, folk, but I'm fine with it. But yeah, I'm an exception in this case. But it is harder for us to find things that are like in chat discussions on Facebook or in some other online set of message boards. That doesn't mean don't go there if that's where you go, but it's just harder for us to find everything that isn't centralized. So we're doing our best to look for that stuff because we want all the feedback we can get. But yeah, the surveys and the forums are our top two easiest to find, paying the most attention to, where we know how to find everything, places for this information.
Great. Let's touch on one thing a little bit that you mentioned and we kind of talked a bit about, but I want to see if there's more to this about the alternate realities and jumping into those things that exist, but maybe they're just not accessible by everybody. This class can actually access those realities. Tell me a little bit about how that jives with knowing that there's always these different things and this one ability or this one class is able to access those things. How does that work with, say, world building and building a homebrew for something like this? And if this class is able to say, oh, well, there's another reality where this has happened, how does that jive with somebody that is trying to build a world for the PCs?
I really think that it's all about the player being creative and the player understanding the world around them in the game and being able to iterate on what the GM is putting in front of them, right? And so when you're playing the game, you're in a specific area, you're, in a starship, or you're in a city, or you're exploring a new world, or you're fighting some alien creatures, or you're in some sort of new environment that you've never been in. And so I think it's a lot about the player really kind of thinking about where they're at, what environment they're in, and what might be some possible differences, or what abilities do they have that would allow them to shift just very small aspects of that. And one of the things about the Witchwarper that I hope is fun and cool for people is that there's definitely a progression that is in the class as far as starting out and having these innate powers and this innate ability to see into alternate realities, but having it be limited. So that maybe, because Infinite Worlds has the difficult terrain usage at first level, but only has the difficult terrain usage at first level, that you can look into alternate realities and change the terrain and see the way the terrain is different in another alternate reality, but you can't necessarily change an acid pool to a lava pit yet. But you can because you're getting better at seeing all of these things at once. You're getting better at understanding, the infinite worlds around you and being able to see into more things, more numbers of things all at once. And that's how you're getting your additional abilities, because you are mastering this natural ability and talent that you have. And the class features that you get later on are really meant to mimic that sort of proficiency that you're gaining with this power that you were probably born with, but you're honing as you're exploring and learning more about yourself as a character.
And the Witchwarper speaks directly to what we are saying is the assumed cosmology of Starfinder. And all the classes do that to some extent, right? The Solarian can draw upon the powers of supernovas and black holes to affect the universe with gravity and force and light, but also has a charm spell-like ability because the life-giving sun connects all things. That's a statement about cosmology. We do our very best to make those have enough detail that the players and the GMs know what they're talking about, but not drill down so deep that you have to do things in one specific exact way. Mm-hmm. So, yes, once you have said Witchwarpers are part of a campaign, then definitely at least the concept of alternate realities are part of that campaign. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that a GM has to let anyone go to an alternate reality, right? They can say, oh, the only way that you can access these things are temporarily through the Witchwarper. If you wanted to, you could also say, oh, you're not actually connecting alternate realities. You're just using magic to change what this could have been. Okay. So that reality doesn't actually exist. You're just listing out possibilities, and you're using magic to force it, so that basically everything you do is a minor wish spell. Oh, I wish this circumstance was the way it would have been if these 12 million things had happened differently over the past few thousand years. But you can go the other route, too. One of the things I've seen people talk about in the playtests is having Witchwarpers where they're saying, I assume my Witchwarper doesn't actually cast spells. Everything they do is drawing from an alternate reality. So if I cast a caustic conversion spell, I'm not casting it. I am switching to a point in reality where someone else casts caustic conversion, and I'm borrowing the spell they cast, and I'm dropping it here. Or someplace where a battery broke and sprayed acid, right? So none of what I do is traditional magic, even though all the same rules apply. So the game mechanics define how things work within the game, and we want there to be enough cosmology and logistics for people to know why those things are, but still leave things open for the interpretation of the player and the GM, because we don't ever want to tell you your cool idea isn't cool enough for Starfinder, right? We want to inspire you and give you a framework to operate in, but then we want to leave your imagination to tell the kinds of stories and the kinds of characters you want to.
Yeah. And the idea that not only are you necessarily pulling from alternate realities, but if you are playing in a world where instead of alternate realities, you are seeing a little bit into the future, you are seeing a different way that something might have gone in this reality, which is the only one that exists because your GM has said so, the class kind of plays into that as well. There's an ability called Alternate Outcome that is about seeing a blip forward in time and realizing that what you're about to do might not work, or realizing that, well, you should have turned to the left while you're trying to pick that lock instead of to the right, and letting you re-roll basically on that. Like, that is the flavor, that is the vehicle for that type of ability. And so if that is the way that your GM wants to play, or that's the way you want to play the character, the class allows you to play into that with the mechanics as well.
Great. So I think for the most part, we've covered the basics. We are probably ready to do some Q&A.
Q&A sounds good.
Imagine.
Yeah.
I have some Q's right here to start off with. So
I have some A's. Yeah.
You guys are picking up what I'm laying down. I like this.
We've done this before.
Yeah, that's true.
It is true.
So let's do this. I'm going to do a goodbye.
Okay.
And we'll wrap up this first part, and then we'll start doing some Q&A.
And then we'll sing a Christmas carol?
And we probably will, yeah. I'm okay with that. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you liked today. We were talking about the Witchwarper. I hope you had a good time and you learned a lot. We've done the Biohacker. That should be available on our playlist for the Starfinder Wednesdays. We just did the Witchwarper. And then at the beginning of January, we're going to do the final one, the Vanguard. And that's going to be a good one. Joe Passini's going to be on the show. It's going to be amazing.
Yay!
So if you like the video, if you like this one, please consider following us on Facebook. I mean on YouTube. Hit the like button, hit the bell so that you're notified every time I upload another video, which happens like 3 times a week. So it really helps. And aside from that, I think please join the playtest. We need your feedback for this. It only goes until January 16th, so not that much longer. That's what helps us make the game exactly what fits best. And so we need your feedback for that. So go to starfinderplaytest.com, learn everything you need to learn, get in the game, and give us that sweet data, because that's what helps us the most. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us, folks. For Paizo and for Owen and Amanda, it's me. I'm your old buddy Dan. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye.